All right, I know it's been a little time since I have done a video where you get to stare at my lovely face. You know, all the scars, all the tragedy, all the beauty. Oh, just getting philosophical here. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about fermentation from home. It's a fun thing to do. Fermentation doesn't belong to the corporations. It doesn't belong to the scientists. It doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to the human race and nature itself. You know, animals can eat fermented fruit and get loaded a bit. It's happened before many times. It'll happen again. I'll let you know a recent fermentation project I engaged in is a black tea, Earl Grey actually. I like Earl Grey tea. It has some kind of spicing in it. I forget what it is. And lemon. Added about 9 cups of corn sugar to a gallon. Heated it up to kill all the bacteria, of course, and then pitched it with some champagne yeast. And this is the product. I waited about 3 weeks. I'm not going to bottle it. I'm not going to try to carbonate it. I don't know. It's more like wine, I guess. My guess is it's probably about 10%, 11% ABV. With 9 cups of sugar and champagne yeast, that yeast is going to go wild in that sugar. And when it stops, it's going to be at a pretty high level. It's not a yeast that can't handle the sugar or the alcohol. It's got a high tolerance. So I waited about 3 weeks, I think. It's kind of pairing it with a triple IPA that I'm still letting sit in the secondary fermenter, because the secondary, it has to sit in there for at least 3 weeks, the triple IPA, and I gave it another week just to try to make sure that I don't blow bottles up. I think there's a couple things that I've been doing wrong recently. One is not letting the brew sit long enough in the secondary, beyond what it's recommended. Just give it another week or so. It's still fine. Don't wait too much longer than a week. And then when I bottle it, make sure I have enough room in the neck, because I think with high alcohol beers, just common sense that they would release more CO2. And with my Belgian Wits, which I brewed back, man, when did I brew those? Man, sometime in the spring. I've lost about 3 bottles. I just think I'm inconsistent about neck room. You know, I don't give the amount of room that I need to, because the CO2 has to go somewhere, and if it's saturated in the beer, it's got to go into the neck. And if it goes into the neck, there's a very good chance, if there's not enough room, that's going to put pressure on the glass. And surprisingly, it's not the cap that comes off. You'd think the first thing to come off would be the cap. No, it's not. It's not a twist off. It's a capped beer bottle with an opener. So the bottle cap rarely comes off. It's usually the bottle that shatters. And I've lost 3 Belgian Wits. And again, I think I followed the directions to a T. I didn't do anything to tweak the kit. I didn't add more sugar. I didn't add more hops. I didn't, whatever. I just followed the instructions to a T, and I still had some volatility problems, which I think I'm just inconsistent on my measurements with pouring it in the bottle. I bottled directly out of the secondary. I used that gauge thing, and I just turned the valve off and on. But what I need to do is I need to mark the bottles with at least a good inch every time. I can get it precise. I just need to know where it is. I don't have to use one of those apparatuses, which is like suck out the beer and then pump it into the bottle. I can do it by eye. I just have to know where the line is. So that's the thing. But this hard iced tea is really good. I've had about, I would say about half of a quart, maybe a little bit more. I put a lot of ice in this too, so it's probably more than half a quart. And my guess is it's probably about 11% ABV. It's awfully sweet still, which means the yeast could only ferment up to a certain point, then it stopped. And that's usually about 11 or 12%, unless you do something different with your brewing. So it's gonna peak out about 11 or 12%. It can't go any higher. It kills the yeast at a point. There's too much alcohol in it. So my guess it's probably 11%. It's still very, very sweet. The lemon is operating kind of like the hops would in a beer. The malt in a beer is the sweet part, of course, and often you add sugar, corn sugar, not table sugar, but corn sugar or dextrose, to the mash to make it sweeter, to increase the ABV, so the yeast can ferment more of those sugars. I mean, it's possible to add more barley or malted barley or extract or whatever. You can increase the sugar that way. It's pretty expensive. So what you're looking to do is have the malt for sugar, but also for flavor. It does both those things. And the sugar is just pure alcohol. It doesn't have any flavor at all. Think vodka. I mean, it has a flavor. It's hot. In terms of you can taste the alcohol itself. It's got a burn to it. But if you have the malt profile already established and you have the hop profile established, then the sugar just fills in the middle, if that makes any sense, and I think it does. So this is really, really good. Fermenting is super easy. You just have to be super sterile. You don't want to ferment right out of, like if you boil the tea, I mean, you can make tea at room temperature with like, instant or whatever. Don't do that. Make sure to boil your kettle. Make sure to kill all the bacteria. Throw your sugars in there, the corn dextrose or the corn sugar or the dextrose. It takes a while to bring it down temperature-wise. I didn't run this through the vert chiller. It wasn't enough. It's only 1 gallon. It would have been more of a pain in the ass to do it that way. I just had to wait. So it took about 4 or 5 hours to get it down to fermentable temperature. The yeast was a little bit heat tolerant. This yeast is a champagne yeast. It can actually ferment up to 90 degrees, which is super unusual. So it's been conditioned to be able to handle high temperatures. It's not ideal, but I had this stuff upstairs for a while, and now I have it downstairs in my kitchen. My kitchen's probably 82 degrees, but I'm not worried because the yeast can handle it. It just ferments at a different rate. So that's about it. But this hard tea is delicious. It really is. The lemon operates kind of as the hop side of it. The tea operates more as like the barley side, and then the sugar in the middle just fills out the fermentation profile. So I'd recommend that you get into making something like this. Make sure to use champagne yeast because I think it's pretty forgiving and it's big. So I wouldn't use a more temperamental yeast for a different type of brewing. That's about all I have to say for today.